Hello, this video is a very brief summary of the research in our paper Extended Reality Remote Research, a survey of drawbacks and opportunities. I am Jack Ratcliffe, one of the co-authors of this paper, along with Francesco Soave, Professor Nick Bryan-Kinns, Dr. Laurissa Tokarchuk, and Dr. Ildar Farkhatdinov. The rationale for this paper was there was a lack of literature concerning conducting remote research with XR technologies, and that evolved into this survey of drawbacks and opportunities. We got 46 responses to our 30-item questionnaire, then thematically analyzed the responses from these respondents and came up with 6 sub-themes around the drawbacks and opportunities in remote XR research. Now, we can't go into full detail about these, but we can give a brief overview of them. For full details, please read the paper. But the first of these themes was study subtypes. So we summarized the types of experiments people were running into 4 study subtypes. One is in-lab being vital, so that's where you have bespoke hardware or controlled conditions are very important. And on the other end of the continuum was remote vital, which is where you want to ensure that the participant is in the wild or in their naturalistic settings when they might engage with the hardware or the exercise. Now, between those, there was also in-lab preferred and remote preferred. For in-lab preferred, it was so that you wanted some kind of control, or you felt like it would be best if the researcher was there to be supportive. And remote preferred was when they really wanted to take advantage of what they speculated were the benefits of remote research, such as wider participant reach and recruitment. Which brings us to our second theme, participants. So the majority of researchers felt that participation in lab have typically quite small recruitment sizes, and that if they move to remote, they could be a lot larger. But with that came questions about balance and who were these remote participants, and is it a balanced sample size? Does this have some kind of efficiency difference? Maybe it might be more efficient to run remote studies. And how do you ensure that the correct participant requisites are checked when you never actually meet these people? The third theme was data collection. A big concern about this was hardware, in that a lot of people use bespoke or rare hardware to collect data, such as ECGs or EEGs, which are not available remotely to users. Not many people have a brain scanning device at home. And typically their VR experience is one that is consumer grade, such as an Oculus Quest, rather than, say, an HTC with eye tracking. There were also questions about the process of data collection, how that could be stored, and also how qualitative data can be picked up from observing a participant, which is a lot more difficult when that participant is maybe doing the study asynchronously from you. The fourth theme was experimentation questions, so things like being in a controlled environment versus not, being able to interact with participants and what that leads to, what the setting affects in the research, how hardware and software might have different problems and solutions remotely and in lab, if the setting affects the research question of the experiment, and potentially cost implications for remote and in-lab studies. The fifth theme was health and safety, which covered things like the protocols of in-lab studies and out-of-lab studies and how you can ensure health and safety measures are met, what the equipment has to be, and how support can be given both in-lab and remotely. The sixth and final theme was ethics, which is we've quite well established in-lab ethical procedures, but where does the ethical response and understanding for the risk that we put remote researchers through? Is there a responsibility issue that needs to be understood? So I'm just going to present the sort of 5 key questions that we feel from all of these themes are still really important for the XR researcher community to answer. The first is, how can we access a large pool of remote XR participants? Because most people see this as the main game of remote XR studies. The second is, who are these potential remote XR participants, and are they representative? The third is, to what extent do remote XR studies affect results compared with in-lab studies? The fourth is, what are the built-in XR data collection affordances of XR hardware, and what can they help us study? How can we use the hardware that we know people have and its affordances to ensure that our experiments are useful and optimal? And finally, 5, how can we lower the barrier to creating encapsulated experimental software to maximize the potential of XR research? And by encapsulated software, we mean building software where when people do remote research, it's all available, the data collection and the experimentation, inside one piece of software, which can then be shared as part of the paper, part of the report, be used for reproducibility studies, and even be iterated on by other researchers to enhance and develop research questions, much like literature and research in the field is.